bee features as much in folklore from around the world as it does in our gardens at summertime, yet in this video I can only scratch at the surface of this vast body of information. Bees show up in human art forms as soon as mankind learned to create them. Bees crop up everywhere from poetry to prose and even in our everyday sayings. We can be as busy as a bee, we make a beeline for things, we can get a bee in the bonnet, and the term bee's knees now famously refers to something fabulous, although originally it referred to something small and insignificant. And if you think the use of the term honey in terms of love is something from the age of pop songs, think again. The Sumerians and the Egyptians were doing it in poetry around 4,000 years ago. Bees are linked with magic, love, industriousness, and creativity. The mere presence of bees on a farm, near a dairy, or in a factory was said to improve the productivity. To the Vikings, mead, made from honey, was one of the main ingredients, along with the blood of Kvasir, of the mead of poetry, a magical brew that could give the gifts of wisdom and poetry and immortality to anybody who drank it. In many parts of the world, bees are considered to be able to grant the gifts of poetry, eloquence, and song to mankind. In ancient Egypt, the bee, in particular the honey bee, was one of several royal symbols and was used consistently for over 4,000 years. The bee represented the pharaoh's sovereignty over Lower Egypt, and the pharaoh was often referred to as he or she of the sedge and the bee. To the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh was a god king, and his association between bees and deities seems to be as old as the religion itself. Bees were supposedly born from the tears of the sun god Ra. The temple of Neith, the goddess of the night, was known as the house of the bee, and the sanctuary of Osiris, god of the underworld and death, was the mansion of the bee. In times past, people worshipped the goddess Ostheia and her husband the bee god Babylos. The Romans had the goddess Melonia, and the Slavs had the god Zosim. Bees were also associated with other deities such as Artemis, Aphrodite, Brigid, Rhea, and Vishnu. Bees symbolize wealth, wealth of knowledge, or the wealth of good luck, as well as meaning wealth in the financial sense. In Wales, it was very lucky if bees of any kind set up home or near your home, as they were said to bless it with prosperity. Even in modern folk magic, bumblebees serve as a charm for health and wealth, and honey has been used in folk magic to treat just about every ailment mankind has ever been known to suffer with. Bees have long been associated with witches and witchcraft. One Lincolnshire witch was said to have a bumblebee as her familiar animal. Another witch from Scotland allegedly poisoned a child in the form of a bee. And in Nova Scotia, a male witch was accused of killing a cow by sending a white bumblebee to land on it. Bees are also linked with fairies, partly due to their winged nature, but also thanks to the 16th century Italian poem Orlando Furioso by Ludovico Ariosto, which features a good fairy with the very apt name of Melissa. From the Isle of Man comes the tale of a group of fairies who, as they flew about, made a noise similar to that of a bumblebee. Bees, like fairies, are often considered guardians of the natural world because of their vital role in the pollination of many plants. Speaking to a bee, either to a honeybee or a bumblebee, harshly was said to drive it away, as was swearing. Bees had to be spoken to in very specific ways. Telling the bees is an old English folk custom where bees are treated like members of the family and kept up to date with all the goings on. Many of us are familiar with the tradition of telling the bees when someone in the family, especially the bee's primary keeper, dies, but traditionally all family news, including births, marriages, etc., and even news about visitors, was told to the bees as a common courtesy. There is a caveat to this. You had to be careful who told the bees what. For example, only the bride should tell the bees of an upcoming wedding and not anybody else, no matter how well-intentioned they were. It was believed that failure to tell the bees important news would result in them flying away, stopping honey production, or dying. In both Britain and America, honeybees were even invited to weddings and funerals, and if they didn't make it, then food and drink from the wake or a piece of the bridal cake was left by the hive. This idea of telling the bees goes much deeper than the news of births, marriages, and deaths. It harks back to the idea that bees are messengers to the divine or to other realms. In many parts of Britain, bees are known as the little servants of God, or the small messengers of God, and this idea of bees as messengers dates back to Greek mythology, where a dryad once sent his message of love to Eurycus. In Welsh folklore, bees, like man, were considered the only creatures to have come from paradise, and were seen as especially beloved by God. People have long shared their lives with bees and talked with the bees, perhaps in the hope that the bees will pass their concerns on to a higher power or take their worries away, or perhaps it's just that in talking to the buzzing bees one cannot help but be cheered up by them.